So for those who don't know me, I'm Jean-Baptiste Poline. I work at INEURO in Montreal at McGill University. And this presentation has been prepared by Kevanda, Peter Bandettini, who is going to talk later on, and Nikola Stikov and myself. So the purpose today is to give you some general information about the project from conception to launch. So the mission of Aperture is stated in this slide. I can read it quickly for you. The purpose is to enable diverse approach to sharing and communicating high quality, community-based, open neuroscience while bringing transparency, interactivity to the publishing process. So Aperture was really created recognizing some needs of the community. First of all, the openness of it. I think it's an important aspect of it. We want an open publishing platform where authors keep their copyrights, for instance. Second, we think the community needs something that is based on the actual community itself. So the voice of the OHBM and the neuroscience is heard, and this is why the key decision of that project are actually done by the council that is elected by you as a community. Third, we acknowledge that there are many open access journals, but few actually have reached a very high quality aspect. And therefore still I think we need to increase that aspect and have both an open publishing platform and a very high quality one. And fourth, I think it's important, we need that the publication model is widening what we publish. And at the moment, most of the objects that we publish are just PDF, and they're simple text and a PDF on a PDF format or other format. But if we want to give higher values to other research objects, such as data sets, code, notebook, libraries, tutorials, or hybrid objects, some things that are composed of those things, and those will be more reusable, and I think that's a very important aspect, and we make science progress faster using these hybrid objects. So the reusability and to some extent the reproducibility of our research is at core here. So the history of the project is actually dates quite from a few years now. It's already quite long, but I think we can trace its origin when Martin Lindquist was elected educational chair. I think in 2016 for the 2016 conference. And at that time, Nico Krieger-Skorter was the past educational chair. I was the elected educational chair, and there was a lot of discussion amongst us and others. So I think the inception of the project was started when we were planning the San Juan meeting that had to be relocated in Vancouver. In a nutshell, the timeline was approximately the creation of topic, the OHBM Publishing Initiative Committee, a lot of advocacy and outreach and listening to the community. And then the first proposal with Nikola Stikov in Vancouver in 2017. Then in 2019, we had like a council meeting in Nice. That was a landmark one for the advance of the project. And then Singapore again with the first roundtable, the topic roundtable, and then turned into the Aperture roundtable in Rome 2019. So it is quite a long sort of like a process, and we have a lot of listening to the community and various views on the project. I think it was an important maturation period. There is no way we can thank and recognize the work of all the people that have actually are really been influential in that project. This is just a list of the topic committee that I had at the time, and there are some like key people over there that have been so industrious in the advancement of the Aperture project. I would like to thank in particular Nikola Stikov. He has been my partner in crime for like a long time, chairing the communication committee of OHBM, and this is really was he gave us so much of a push on those things. but all the people who have started with, like gave the ground for that seed to be planted, and in this topic committee. So the topic was the OHBM publication initiative committee, and all the people have started like some working groups and to get that platform off the ground. I will now hand it over to Peter, who's been with Michael Breakspear and others, been so industrious and helpful on the project, to give you the rest of the presentation on Aperture.
Okay, all right, thanks, JB. I'm just going to continue on to talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of Aperture. And let's see here. There we go. Okay, so as JB mentioned, there has been a number of years and quite a few people who were involved in starting it out. And from that group of people, we decided to form a oversight committee. And this is sort of a committee to sort of help one, sort of get the whole process going by hiring an editor-in-chief, and then sort of advising on sort of the structure that we've been developing over the years. So, and that committee, as you can see right here, is consisting of some of the people who were involved in the beginning: JB, myself, Nikola, Jessica Turner, Michael Breakspear, and a number of new people who have a really good perspective and a good representation of the community as well. Other people, Tom Nichols, Lord Atlas, Heidi Johansenberg, and David Kennedy have also joined as the advisory Aperture Oversight Committee. And also this committee too is, at least like a lot of things in Aperture, it's sort of evolving. So the role of this committee right now and for the foreseeable future is to advise. Ultimately, it would be thought that Aperture, with its editor-in-chief and with its editors, will be sort of self-sustaining and actually sort of on its own, and may have less and less of a need for an oversight committee. But we'll see how that goes in the future. Okay, so as far as the purpose, I sort of went over this a little bit. It's to oversee the development and operation of Aperture, provide feedback, make decisions on the structure, publishing framework. Who's moving a mouse on me? Is that me? Okay. Oh, okay. Well, editorial policies, marketing, and operating costs of the platform. Once the editor-in-chief is selected and the editorial board is created, the AOC will not have any direct oversight over the editorial content. And that's important. It's really going to be handled by the editors. But we'll still advise the editor-in-chief as needed on operational things. Okay, and also it will serve as a sort of a connection or communication bridge between the council and the editorial office to oversee the business aspect of it as well. Okay. So here's our business model overview. So the goal certainly is not to make a profit. The goal is to make a sustainable platform. And right now we're getting a certain amount of help from OHBM to get off the ground. And our open access peer review will be what's known as the custom gold open access business model. And this will basically be that there's no fee for submitting articles, but for publishing, and I'll go into the cost a little bit later, but it's a relatively low cost of publishing, and of course it's open access for everyone, so there'll be no cost of downloading and accessing the content. All submissions will be published through the Attendee Interactive platform under a Creative Commons attribution license. Attendee Interactive is, I'll get into that a little bit later as well. It's the platform we chose for now, and it's been working with OHBM a number of years on their abstracts as well. So it's a pretty robust and flexible platform that's relatively low cost. So this custom gold model will, and also the journal will have a clear hardship policy that will allow authors who are unable to pay for publication fees. We'll be reducing those costs, and we'll be coming up with a more solid policy as far as that's concerned. So the custom gold model for Aperture will allow us to recover the costs only associated with running the journal. We're not planning on making a profit, and we'd like to not have OHBM have to sustain our costs as well. So we have a part-time journal manager. We have to pay for the interactive attendee interactive platform, and of course we have to pay for marketing and other things like a plagiarism check program, screening, PubMed registration. So to cover all those costs, that's why we're charging $1,000 per publication. And once we get a certain rate of submissions and publications, after a few years, hopefully, we'll each reach an equilibrium that's completely self-sustainable. So, and so that's the business model right now, and we're starting it off as low cost as possible. Okay. So then the question you might be asking yourself is why should we even publish with Aperture? And one thing is that, and I'll just sort of go through the highlights of these notes here, is that Aperture's scientific reach is made up of, obviously the OHBM community, which is very diverse. And importantly, the types of research objects that people would be able to publish on Aperture is not only a PDF, and this is looking at the second part here, it's not only PDF, but also there'll be data sets, there'll be code, and many different types of code, everything from C to Jupyter notebooks and whatnot. And so these research objects will increase the impact and also probably increase the connectivity across publications as well, and also the connectivity of the community as a whole. So we think that there's much more to research than just having a PDF, and just sharing a PDF of a paper is great, but it would be so much easier to have code and access to data as well. So this is what we're aiming for. Of course, with the credibility, regarding credibility, all materials will be very much sent through a review process, very similar to standard journals. Of course, checking for ethical and other guidelines. Of course, minimizing plagiarism, things like that. And as far as the author access, OHBM members will get a little bit of a discount for publishing, I think $800 as opposed to $1,000. And the portal, we're still optimizing it, but and there'll be a lot of evolution in the process, but it's still already it's pretty straightforward to submit papers and publishing research objects. And so as far as the price is concerned, as I just already went over, with 0 submission fees and a nonprofit basis for publication costs, Aperture offers both the value and incentive for authors to submit their research objects. So it'll be relatively inexpensive. It will be pretty straightforward to submit, and also it's a community publishing platform that will quickly, I think, hopefully catch on within the OHBM community. Okay. So as JB was mentioning, Aperture goes back to 2015 at least, as far as the development of the conception, but we've made some rapid progress in the last year, or since January. So a big step towards accelerating our launching has been hiring Kay Vanda as a journal manager. She's been working extremely hard on being the bridge between us and Attendee Interactive and us and OHBM, as far as, and also just generally handling a lot of the things that typically take a lot of time and doing it extremely well. So that's that was a great advancement in January. So in February, we began to sort of finalize a plan of operations for publishing, review, editing, things like that. It's nearly finished, and I think that it will, for the next several years, it will be sort of a work in progress, but it's at a level right now where we've agreed upon a basic structure. As far as the operations plan, that was approved by council. The basic operations plan of like what we're going to do, how much we're going to charge, what the platform is. And we're looking right now for, so this is looking at April. Since April, we've been sort of thinking about, but now in the last month, we've been looking for an editor-in-chief. We still haven't found one. Maybe by the time you hear this presentation, we'll have one. But I would recommend, if you're interested, to consider contacting one of us if you're interested in being the editor-in-chief, because that's kind of the most important position as far as hiring the other editors as well. So that's sort of the point at which we're trying to sort of, that's our last step to actually get it completely off the ground. We've been doing site testing for the submission platform, a lot of troubleshooting, a lot of things, working out things that don't make sense. We started a new Aperture website, and we launched a Twitter account. So in May, we finished our site testing, and we've added to the Aperture Oversight Committee to make it more diverse and representative of the community. And right now, like I said, we're in the process of trying to find an editor-in-chief. The platform's ready. We're probably going to start soft submissions. What I mean by that, or for a soft launch, is we'll start out by inviting specific authors to write either review articles or tutorials to sort of test out the system with a low number of papers just to get it going, and then we'll officially open it up probably in July, August for more papers, or somewhere around there. Okay. So as far as the platform development, as I mentioned, we were contracting Attendee Interactive. We have been trying to try to find a truly open access platform, and I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. But until we've sort of worked that out in the far long run, several years from now potentially, we're working with Attendee Interactive, which actually has been extremely responsive in terms of how flexible they were and how relatively inexpensive they are, and pretty much sort of listening very carefully to what we wanted in terms of the author experience. And also, of course, Attendee Interactive, for anyone who submitted abstracts for OHBM, it's what you work with to submit your abstracts, and it's a good first step with Aperture, and it has a good working relationship with OHBM administration as well. So it seemed like a good choice as far as that's concerned. So we've worked with Attendee Interactive. I mean, a lot of our discussions with Attendee Interactive were to create a workflow model. And what I mean by that is, so with every journal, there's this sequence of events that happens when a group or a person submit a paper or a publishing or a research object. And that is, you have to agree who receives the paper, how it's passed down, how it's reviewed, how the senior editors look at it, how reviewers are solicited. So we've worked closely with Attendee Interactive. We started with some creative ideas in terms of how we might be able to solicit reviewers, but we settled into a mostly traditional model for now, where we basically have, and I'll go into that in a couple of slides, but we'll have a senior editor or an editor-in-chief passes it to a senior editor. They then find reviewers, either up to 3 if necessary. And once they get the reviews, the senior editor looks at them, passes a decision back up to the editor-in-chief, and then a decision is made. Then it's, of course, iterated through. So the platform was designed so to have a little bit of flexibility. And we're still working on optimal ways that the authors can submit links to a variety of materials, including data, software, Jupyter notebooks, tutorials, and preprints. So, and that's actually a point where we're still developing things, where we might be able to substitute whole databases for the links. We don't know exactly how this will be optimized or standardized, but we're still developing it. And so not many other journals have done this type of work. We're also trying to figure out how best data and code will be reviewed as well. So, of course, it's very different than reviewing a paper. It takes a certain amount of expertise, and that will be worked on. Okay. And well, here's I just want to show a quick example. This is sort of like the dashboard. It's very simple right now. Profile, submit to Aperture. You can just click on the button and go from there. You can list your research objects right here. And right now we have everything from notebooks to software, replications, negative results, gender tutorials. So we certainly encourage negative results, data, etc. And so this will be very flexible and hopefully robust and cross-referenceable. Okay. So about the platform. And certainly there's a little bit of redundancy in these slides just to give you a sense of what's going on. As far as the platform is concerned, it will be, people are encouraged to visit the Aperture website. It will feature resources and content to complement Aperture's published objects, for instance, the author guide and submission process, and highlight the editorial board. And even if you're a non-member of OHBM, you'll be prompted to create an Aperture profile. And as I mentioned before, publishing is $1,000 for non-members, $800 for members. And in countries that are deemed disadvantaged or whatever, or specific groups, we're coming up with a more standard policy for reducing the price of publishing there as well. So it'll be very flexible and very dynamic and updated every year. So, and as I mentioned, it was designed with versatility in mind. I already went through, this is very flexible. If there are new research objects that come online, we can add them. And we'd like to be able to cross-reference these. But basically that is the pretty straightforward format by which you can submit these objects. So you can imagine actually submitting a paper and linking it to a data set and some C code or some Python code and then a Jupyter notebook. So you could probably link all these things all at once and submit them. And that would be a very, very valuable research object then. So that's the goal. But even when we do publish these large linked objects, they'll each have a DOI, and we'll eventually get an impact factor that takes about 3 years. But they'll be citable with cross-reference Google Scholar as well. So they'll be very citable, they'll have a DOI, and it takes, like I mentioned, 3 years to get a impact factor. Okay. And as I mentioned before, here's the editorial board. You have the editor-in-chief. We may or may not have a deputy editor-in-chief. It all depends on, once we get an editor-in-chief, if they feel they can do it alone. Otherwise, if they feel they can't, oops, there we go. Then we'll have a deputy editor-in-chief. Otherwise, we'll have a team of handling editors attempting to cover all the categories that exist. It's everything from big data to applications to methods to processing. So we'll cover the whole gambit. Everything that is covered with OHBM should be covered in Aperture. Okay. And as I mentioned, this is the editorial workflow. So the author submits a research object. I'm not going to go into great detail here, but essentially it's a very traditional one where the journal manager receives the paper, makes sure it's formatted properly and all the objects are properly formatted. Then she passes off to the editor-in-chief, who then passes off to the handling editors and the reviewers. And this goes through a process by which the reviewers pass it up to the handling editor, who then makes a decision, passes it to the editor-in-chief, and so on, who makes the final decision. And this can iterate as many times. There'll be several reviews if necessary, or we will have rejections as well. We really do want this, not only, certainly want it to be open access and very accessible and easily able to be submitted to, but we also want to keep the standards very high for this journal so that there's not a lot of noise and poor quality studies. So hence the review process. So I just went over this. Essentially, we've had a lot of discussion about the various review systems, like having double blind or having everyone either anonymous or not, the reviewer anonymous, not anonymous. And right now, we selected just a traditional option in which the authors are not anonymous to the reviewers, but the reviewers are anonymous to the authors as default. However, they can opt to remove their anonymity at any time, either after it's published or during the process. So it's extremely flexible. These are just the default settings for what exists as far as the review process is concerned. Okay, and typically we'll ask for 2 reviews, but if we need to, we'll ask for more. And as I mentioned, we're open for suggestions as to the best method for reviewing code or data, how deeply to review it, how much expertise is necessary, how to do it in a timely fashion. We're still working that out completely. So we certainly do want to make sure that the code is thoroughly reviewed. Yeah, this is all basically just a repeat of everything that I just said. So the system that we're trying to set up, and we're still negotiating this and trying to figure it out, but I think that as far as code is concerned, we might have a team or a list of code competent reviewers. So people who not only are good at the code, but who really want to review code. And that may not be a big list. It might be 20 people or 30 people, and who, will just review code. And so we'll have that list. We'll have it available to the journal manager and the editors, of course. And so that might be the system. It might be a little bit different than just finding peer reviews, because reviewing code and even reviewing data takes a certain amount of commitment and expertise that might be more specialized. And so we'll have sort of virtual teams to do that sort of thing when needed. Okay, and as far as what's next, so our soft launch is underway. We're working on finalizing the submission process, and we're starting a call for contributions from the community to submit anything they want, either tutorials, review articles for now potentially, or novel research objects as well. Like I mentioned, though, we're sort of asking for a number of solicited, sort of either review articles or tutorials from very specific people, just to sort of work out all the kinks in the system as we just start up. So, and as I mentioned, we'd like to become self-sustaining. We want to have an impact factor within 3 years. That's how long it takes, typically for journals. And so we also are collaborating with so it's called the Collaborative Knowledge Foundation, or the COCO Foundation, to potentially build a version 2 of the Aperture platform that is completely open source and also meets Aperture's open access submission needs. So this was sort of the the original intent, but we realized it was a little bit more tricky and it took a little bit more effort than we necessarily had time to get going. So that's why we went with the Attendee Interactive. And for all purposes, we might go with the Attendee Interactive, over the years. But at the same time, it's important that everyone knows that we are keeping our eyes open for working on an open source platform for Aperture, completely open source platform as well. And just sort of keeping our eyes on the future and trying to make it even more open source. So, okay. And I think that's it. Okay. And yeah, so that's pretty much all of my talk about Aperture. And if any of you have any questions, I think there's an option for that. But and of course, feel free to email JB or myself or whatever if you have any questions in the future about this. But we're really excited about this, and we really think we're offering something unique, and we really feel strongly that it will accelerate the type of work that's being done with most of the OHBM community. Sharing code and sharing data along with the papers is something that will help reduce a lot of work and potentially lead to cross collaborations that one wouldn't have otherwise. So that's the goal. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
That was great.
Oh, thanks.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nikola Stikov. I'm the past chair of the OHBM Communications Committee, and I've also been involved with Aperture from the very early days when we wrote the proposal with JB for the OHBM meeting in Vancouver. I'm not going to take up too much time, but I just want to talk a little bit about the potential research objects that we could be publishing with Aperture and give you some ideas of the work that's already been done and hopefully is low-hanging fruit for publication. So I will just share my screen, and what you'll see first is, here it is, first the results of the survey that we conducted about a year ago, where we asked the OHBM community what kinds of research objects they would be interested in publishing in Aperture. And as you saw, there was a very wide spread. There was a big number of potential research objects, some of them pretty standard, such as original research articles, but also requests for simulations, tutorials, review articles, data sets, and so on. What you see on the left as bullet points are the actual categories in the Aperture submission form. And there is a pretty close match with the results from the survey. And hopefully some of these will be able to produce pretty quickly. And for some of them, we'll ask for input from the community, and hopefully people can come up with some innovative research objects. So as you see on the list, the first two that we have listed are tutorials and notebooks, and those are primarily what I will focus on for the rest of the slides. Partly because these are already objects that exist, but also because most of the others at the bottom can be shoehorned into one of these two formats, which is not to say that there isn't flexibility in what we could be hosting in addition to all of these formats. So the first thing that I would like to show is something that the Communications Committee has already been doing for a while now. And this is under the leadership of Dr. Ilona Lip, who is currently the OHBM blog captain, and Niels Muellert, who is the current OHBM Communications chair. What you see here are 4 tutorials. We call them on-demand how-tos that use the OHBM recorded video sessions from the educational sessions and try to wrap them up into a coherent narrative that addresses a particular aspect of the field, such as resting state fMRI analysis on the left, machine learning and neuroimaging, the second one, diffusion MRI, the third one, and anatomy and neuroimaging, the fourth one. I ordered them chronologically also just to show the amount of work that has gone in and how many people have been contributing to these efforts. So you see that the first one over here, it has 3 co-authors, Danka Jandrić, Jeanette Mumford, and Ilona Lip. And then on the second one, we actually added editors. Those were Thomas and Lisa. And then by the time we got to the third and the fourth one, We added some infographics, courtesy of Rosalind, who is also on the OHBM Communications Committee. And then we also had quite a long list of editors, expert editors and newbie editors that make sure that all of this content is peer-reviewed. As you can imagine, these tutorials take a lot of work, but they also get a lot of attention. And not in the least because they use already existing content on the on-demand platform. And they wrap it into text that is very informative, peer-reviewed, and interactive. So what you can do, what you'll see now are screenshots of all of the tutorials, is that in addition to the text, we have a lot of embedded videos inside, and particular time points at which different aspects of the concept are covered by our guest speakers. The content is very easy to read. The language is simple, but on the other hand, it really serves like a good introduction into a field for a new student that has never been exposed to resting state fMRI or machine learning. All of these tutorials incorporate somewhere between 12 and 20 videos from the on-demand platform. And on top of it, they also include conventional research articles and citations. They're currently hosted on the blog, and if we were to adapt it to Aperture, it would probably take quite a bit massaging to make sure that the look is unified and that we add some interactive features. But we think that it's a very good way forward to bring more visibility to the educational courses and to also get a broad list of contributors that will be working together to create a peer-reviewed tutorial. We have discussed this idea with Tom Nichols, who is this year's education chair, and we decided to pilot the format with one educational session. Most likely it will be network neuroscience, but this is still left to be determined. And what we'll do once we pick a course is Ilona and her team will put together a tutorial, and we will submit it to Aperture, and hope that this will be one of the first Aperture research objects. Now, I mentioned interactivity. There's different ways that we can achieve that, and one of them is by incorporating different kinds of questions that students or anybody watching the tutorial could answer, that way confirming their expertise. This is an idea that we borrowed from our colleagues at the ISMRM. What you see on the left is a list of 12 contributors that work together to create an interactive course on diffusion MRI. And you will see that the first author is Tomi Boszkowski, a student in my lab. And then there's a lot of names that have already been featured in the OHBM diffusion tutorial. But for this one that we did for ISMRM, they actually worked on contributing questions. So I'm going to start this video, and you will see that the educational course here consists of a brief intro, and then a YouTube playlist where everybody can watch all of the videos in their entirety. And once they're watched, they can scroll down, and for each lecture, they will see an annotated question. Once you click on the question, you can have the option to answer any of these potential options. So there they are, they just appeared. So for example, for this one, we got it right. The diffusion is isotropic and Gaussian. For a second one, if we get it wrong, we will get a notification that the question is not answered well. And then once you click on the YouTube video, it will take you exactly to the point where the correct answer is given. So I see great potential in incorporating this into the OHBM on-demand tutorials to create a truly interactive learning experience. Speaking of tutorials, there's also the potential of hosting them on Jupyter notebooks. As you might be aware, Aperture is collaborating with the Canadian Open Neuroscience Platform and their flagship project called NeuroLibre. NeuroLibre is a way of publishing interactive neuroscience notebooks using the Jupyter Book project. And what the result is a PDF-compatible document, which is also interactive and transparent. So you can see the code that generates the outputs in these objects, and you can also interact with the code. You can run it and create the outputs from the notebook. So these are also reproducible research objects. The example I've used here is from a tutorial about T1 mapping, but these notebooks have also been used as supplementary information to already published articles, such as this one in the top, Signature of Alzheimer's Disease, published in Data Science, and this one at the bottom about three-dimensional B1 mapping that is published in the journal Magnetic Resonance in Medicine. So we hope that some Aperture publications will use this format and hopefully create something truly eye-catching and groundbreaking. So these are some ideas. I realize that the community will probably have other suggestions, and we're always open to hear those. We hope that once we get going, people will innovate. And what we would like to do is just bring new format to the masses, hopefully using our own content created by OHBM On Demand, and using open source technology that will make hosting and distributing these research objects easy. Finally, we would like to thank Mox Sethi for coming up with the logo of Aperture, and the Brain Art community for spreading the word and helping us conduct that logo competition. We have a Twitter account. It's at Aperture OHBM, and we encourage you all to follow us. And we look forward to receiving your submissions. Thank you.